daughter Heidi and her husband Ariane joined them on the farm operations, boosting their capacity and again turning dairy farming into a family affair with the next generation becoming involved. The Hofstra's originally tie-stall barn served them well for many years. They worked hard keeping its equipment up to date, regularly checking the electrics and maintaining the highest standards of cleanliness. Nevertheless, tragedy struck on September 2020 when a major fire ripped through the barn, destroying it completely. Thankfully, most of the cows were out in pasture, and Matt, Tim and Deb's son, who was also a trained firefighter, happened to be at the farm that day and managed to get a few remaining cows out of the barn in time, saving them from danger. Of course, the Hofstra's cows still needed shelter and ultimately a new barn. The family found a temporary solution in a vacant farm nearby, and they began plans for building a new barn. The situation gave the Hofstra's a chance to re-evaluate, and after extensive research, they decided to install a robot barn. They worked closely with Dairy Lane Systems to find the right solution for the Tyndale Holsteins. Robotic milking was a logical choice in many ways. The method enables them to milk cows 3 times a day, thus maximizing the farm's efficiency and productivity. But it also safeguards the farm operations, making the farm much more autonomous in the current context of frequent labor shortages. With the new build, the Hofstra's also took the opportunity to embrace other features. These include rubber flooring and water beds in the stalls for better cow comfort and animal welfare, robotic manure removal, and 311 feed kitchen with robotic feeding and a 6-row pyramid feed layout. With fire safety always on the top of the family's agenda, they also installed a high-tech alert system for any electrical faults that could pose a fire hazard in the future. During the building process, many heifers were born on the farm, allowing them to grow the herd from within, and now they are milking 125 cows. The Tyndale is looking forward to the future of the family farm with 3 generations actively involved. So we're going to watch the video first, and then afterwards we have a question session just with Ariane for this specific farm. Enjoy the video.
We are in the county of Leduc here. Debbie, my wife, and I started 45 years ago. July 1st of 1978 is when we bought the farm. We had 3 children. The middle one and her husband are actively involved with us today, Heidi and Ariane, and have been for the last 20 years. The new barn that's in the background is actually the 3rd generation of dairy barns on this farm. The original one was built in the late 20s, and actually the door that's up on the top is part of that barn, as part of the story. In September of 2020, we lost the 2nd generation of dairy barns to a fire. You can imagine, 85 milk cows, and they just lost their home, and they needed to be milked within hours. So it was quite a scramble to find a rental barn that quick and move the whole herd of cows that quick into another facility. Took the pressure off for building immediately, and it gave us an opportunity to do a lot of homework on barn designs and barn equipment, and it also gave us enough time to go touring. Ariane and I went to Ontario for 2 days and extensively toured barns, and that was a real eye-opener, because these were all barns that were 1 or 2 years old only, and a lot of good ideas on equipment and stabling and ventilation and design, and also a lot of good discussions with the owners to share what their good ideas were and what not to do as well, which was also helpful. As we were planning this barn, we love the hip roof look. It's the icon of the dairy barns in the Canadian prairies, and we wanted to incorporate that into the new barn, so the very old along with the very new. When you do a greenfields build, you have the opportunity to start with the dirt work and do it right. When we made our imprint on the dirt here, it was very well compacted, and also lots of extra space, and probably most importantly, all drained. Everything's got a slope from the barn outward on all sides of the dairy barn. So even when we get an inch or 2 of rain overnight, usually by the afternoon everything's dry again. There's no water collecting and standing. But that you can only do when you do a greenfields build. When you're adding on existing buildings, and usually there's drainage issues and yards are tight and you can't do what you want to do. So this gave us luxury of good drainage, lots of room, and also to keep in mind if we ever did expand, and who knows, in the next 50 years that very well could happen, we have lots of room to add on to the barn as well without having to do dirt work again. Our entrance, we're quite proud of. We're in an area where there's a lot of people. There's probably 1.3 million people within 60 or 70 miles from this farm. We get a lot of requests for tours, and we're open to that. We really believe it's important to keep a healthy relationship with our consumer and show them that cows are well cared for and dairy farmers aren't evil. We actually do a good job, and also the milk can be produced very, very high quality and wholesome. We don't mind taking time to keep that connection with our consumers healthy. And that was part of our thinking when we dressed it up on the front a little bit so it would be attractive for tour groups as well. Having these angled windows that you have view of all the cows in the barn. You're looking out the windows a lot. Oh, that cow just came to the robot finally. Oh, that cow needs to go to the robot. Or, all those sort of things that you can see from here that just keeps your eyes on what's happening just a little easier. Put a floor in that's easily washed, because this room, you'll get some dirty boots coming in here because you're breeding cows and going in and out of the barn. But just with a garden hose, and it's all sloped with a good drain, it's easy to keep clean. So this piece of equipment is a Maximus, and actually it's a Canadian company out of Quebec that manufactures these. So this Maximus controls the whole environment in the barn. So we have 6 big mixing fans and 7 chimney fans. So we decide which ones are on, what speed they're on. They're all variable speed motors. And it also has its own weather station on the roof. It also determines if there's a storm coming, and it's got to close the curtain walls, which curtain walls are open and how far they're open. There's sensors all throughout the barn, so some fans might be running on one end and not on the other. If one end is warmer than the other, it's worked out real well. Even when it's minus 40, our barn stays clear all day and all night. We have the luxury of not having to open the big doors for drive-through feeding with the robot kitchen, so that helps quite a bit too for not letting all that cold air in. We choose the airbag system for the curtain walls. There's not a lot of R value in them, like maybe R2, but they do keep the draft out really well. And they close the wall up tight. And with 125 cows in the barn, there's no problem keeping the barn warm enough. So they actually work better than we even thought. They're nice and snug in between the outside rails and the inside rails. So as they inflate, they're snug inside of these. Snug enough that the wind isn't flapping them at all. And of course you have the bird screen as well. So yeah, there's actually, I think 16 cells. There's 5 blowers on the end of each section. And so those 5 blowers are all tied in with a maximum computer, and it decides if it's gonna blow up the first 2 or the first 4 or the first 6. And when it gets to the top level, then it only blows up 1 at a time, because in the wintertime when it's cold, it drops 1 cell open at a time. And it might only drop it open for a few minutes, and then it'll close again. Just enough to give some fresh air in the barn, that you have some air exchange going on. When you're gonna build a new barn, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. And slowly you have to come to a conclusion on that. You can't just keep thinking about it. Sooner or later you're gonna pull the trigger. One of them is these red feed fronts. It's a product out of Ireland. We were attracted to it right away because of the shape of the curve. It was a more natural way for the cow to stand at the feed bunk. And they actually won an award recently for being the best feed front system, like the most natural, as if they're grazing out in the pasture. We went with the coating on the manger just for longevity again. In hindsight, we thought because we're feeding with a robot, we didn't need to make it too wide. And I probably should have made it wider than I did. Another decision we made was it's all Jardine stabling. And we went with Jardine because we really liked the heavy quality of it and the galvanizing of it and the European steel. It was a little bit more money for sure, but the longevity I think will more than pay for itself. The other decision we made after a lot of debate was the bedding stalls, and we went with the DCC water beds. They're quite common in North America. They're made in Wisconsin. They have a 10-year warranty, quite easy to maintain. Twice a day we go through with the scraper and the rake. They're sloped a bit so any liquids would drain out. And we ourselves here use canola straw, and we put it through a double 1-inch screed with a tub grinder, and that's the sole bedding we use now. It's a dusty product. The last thing you want to do is put it through a sawdust thrower, because it just creates so much dust in the barn. It's hard for the cow's lungs and everything. So At first we had a skid steer with a big bucket, and we would dump it on the stall deck, but you couldn't reach far enough to put it in the storage area between the cows' heads. So then we would take a snow shovel and shovel it in, but it was an extra job and that much more dust that would get created by that. So what we did is we bought ourselves a little telehandler. It motors around the barn quite easily because of its size, and it's still got the 18-foot telescoping boom on it, and still an 8-foot bucket. But with that machine, we can bring the 8-foot bucket directly above where we want to dump it, and it nicely just dumps it on a pile. And it's by far, there's still dust, but it's a lot less dust than any other way. Another choice we made was going with all rubber floors, and it's all the Legend rubber, which is recycled mining belt from Australia. What we liked about it was its ruggedness. The barns that had it in, there was no bubbles, it wasn't lifting, and it doesn't stretch. It has a lot of steel cable in it. I think every inch in the belting is a 1/4-inch cable, I believe is what it is. So it's very rugged and heavy. I guess time will tell how long it's going to last. It's been in some barns that we've been touring for 7 or 8 years already, along a fence line feeder, for instance, and it seems to be standing up really well. They cut a groove in it, and they've since actually made that groove into an X pattern. They've updated a little bit, but we're finding it works quite well for the cow's feet. Traction is good. It needs to be wet enough, not too dry. Otherwise it gets a bit more slippery, but we do find if a cow does wipe out, they bounce right back up. You know, we were introduced quite a bit to these feed kitchens. We were impressed with the Trilliette's engineering and how heavy the product steel was, and they've been around since 1954, so they had lots of experience and so on. We've been making our own round bale silage here for many, many years. We decided with our round bale silage program, this would be a good way to go. It's very accurate. It's a scaled conveyor that it's putting the feed on. So when I ask for 575 pounds of first cut, that's exactly what it puts on. And then I'll move on to the green feed bale and put on so many pounds, whatever, and then the third cut or second cut, whatever we might have for the third choice. So we like the accuracy, we like that it's always fresh, we like the labor savings. We load our kitchen typically twice a week, and that's about all it takes for keeping it full. It's all computerized. As you can see, the machine going back and forth, it's doing what it's supposed to do, and when the face of this bale is shaved off, the computer will move that bale ahead another 6 inches, and it'll take off another layer of 6 inches at a time. It's not real fast, but it certainly works for us on our size farm with the amount of cows we milk. And it's all electric power, there's no diesel engines running, so it's fairly efficient on energy use as well. How many cows would a system like this work for well? I'm kind of guessing, but I would say probably not more than 200. I think if it's more than 200, you'd probably want to go more with the blow decks or the Morris Gate style bunkers that you fill from a cement bunker or pile or something and feed loose silage. But because we really like our round bale silage program, this worked for us. But for a larger dairy operation, it probably would have some time restrictions. It wouldn't be fast enough to feed much more than 200 cows. We went with the lily collectors for collecting the manure off the barn floor. From there, it dumps it into a 30-inch culvert, plastic culvert, at the dump stations, and that gravity flows from the center of the barn into this room, and this room has got a 10-foot by 10-foot by 10-foot pit. It flows into here by gravity flow, and when the level gets up in this pit to where it triggers the switch, then the mix master, the Gia mix master, kicks in and makes sure it's sloppy enough, and then the big piston pump kicks in and pumps it to our lagoon through a 10-inch plastic pipe. And our manure lagoon is about 200 feet or so, 250 feet maybe from where the barn is here. We were required to put in a plastic liner. When we did our test holes, they found a few pockets of sand. Even though the clay was excellent, there was a few pockets of sand. So that meant an expensive liner. The liner's not all bad. I guess I know when the custom manure haulers come, they find pits that have a liner mix a lot better than the earthen pits do. It just seems to swirl around better. There's less resistance on the walls, I guess.
So this is our milk robot. In here, this is where the cows come into milk. They can either come from the big group or from the fetch pen. This is our screen that controls it from in here. So we can see what cow's in here and her name. So this is 1442. And then if we tap here, it tells us all like what her milking is and what her flow is and the temperature of it is. One thing that our robots have that not all others have is manual attachment. So we can, if it's a fresh heifer, we can press this button and then the green one, and then we can manually attach the heifer if they are kicky or if they have too much swelling to attach by themselves. Because of our fire, we went from the tie stall to the parlor and then to this. It kind of helped the cows because the cows were more used to going into where they have to get milked instead of the milk machine coming to them.
One of the ideas that we come across when we were touring other people's barns was having a special needs box stall. So if you do have a cow that's off and needs some special care, that you can segregate her all by herself. And it's important that she's got a fresh water bowl here. But we also plumbed in a vacuum line so we can run a milk machine here and a head gate for treating here. We move the calves into this barn from the hutches when they're between 6 and 8 weeks of age, depending on the time of year and how good and thrifty the calf is too, perhaps. They move from hutches to single pens here, and they stay on milk here as well. We typically feed milk longer than most farms. We don't usually wean till they're probably 3.5 months of age. And from these pens, they transition over to the group pens, and we wean them at that time. The whole idea when we built this barn was we're thinking for the next 50 years. Grandchildren, they're all very keen and active in the operation, so we're quite excited to have more generations that show a lot of interest and hopefully someday maybe take over the whole operation as well.